Hey everyone, Nathan Long here, president of Saybrook University. Welcome to another episode of Saybrook Insights. Imagine my surprise when I saw the announcement come from Montana Senator Jon Tester. Big headline, first of its kind program created by Senator's historic Hannon Act to provide VA funding for local suicide prevention programs. Following his efforts, U.S. Senator Jon Tester announced $2.15 million in federal funding for Montana organizations to support efforts to end veteran suicide, the article went. The Department of Veterans Affairs awarded these funds under the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program, a first of its kind created by the Senator's historic Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act, to provide federal funding for local suicide prevention programs. It's quoted as saying, veteran suicide rates are steadily decreasing thanks to mental health and suicide prevention programs under the Hannon Act that are keeping more folks from falling through the cracks, said Tester. That's why he's proud to have championed these funds that'll ensure organizations on the ground have the resources they need to keep up the good work and continue connecting Montana veterans with the life-saving tools they need and earn. So the article was from the senator's site was very inspirational. Now here's the kicker. Earlier this year, Tester also announced VA Montana was selected to serve as a pilot site for a new innovative mental health program established under the Hannon Act to provide access to complementary and integrative health services like equine therapy and agritherapy. As the chairman, he's continuing to work to strengthen veterans' mental health resources by spearheading these types of bipartisan legislative acts and more. Pretty cool. For decades, there's been this tension between what we call traditional medicine and integrative medicine, often referred to interchangeably now as alternative or complementary therapies. My understanding of the tension is that there is a dearth of evidence-based studies supporting such approaches, that certain techniques can be harmful or misleading to patients, and that many of these operate as a placebo rather than real treatment. But as these therapeutic techniques attract the attention of researchers and clinicians, and even politicians, we've been seeing an increase in the acceptance of some of these therapies. Think massage, meditation, yoga, and we're seeing, as with the announcement from Jon Tester's office, approaches like equine therapy and agritherapy. Enter Dr. Donald Moss, the Dean of Saybrook University's College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences. Not only is he a longtime practitioner and researcher in psychology and integrative health, he was largely responsible for the college's founding back in 2009 at the visionary request of President Lorne Buckman, driving efforts in collaboration with our founding dean, James Gordon, from the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. I'm interested in getting into a discussion with Dr. Moss about where integrative medicine and health is at now, where research is pointing to with respect to the strongest correlations to health and well-being, and where more research is needed, and also figuring out what the deal is with all this tension. It's going to be a fascinating discussion with an internationally renowned scholar, practitioner, and academician. Don Moss is truly a gentleman and a scholar. So let's get to it with Dean Dr. Donald Moss. Dr. Donald Moss, thank you so much for joining us today on Saybrook Insights. It's a real honor to have you here today, sir. Before we get started, would like for you to tell us all about yourself, your personal journey, both in academia and how you found your way to Saybrook University.
Well, thank you, Nathan. In some ways, I think I was destined to come to Saybrook University. I earned a master's and a Ph.D. at Duquesne University, which at that time was the real center for existential and phenomenological psychology in the United States. It was a wonderful education. We had opportunities with guest speakers coming in from Europe, some of the major European philosophers and psychologists with a humanistic orientation. And I did a long predoctoral fellowship at the University of Pittsburgh Health Center in a medical and psychological clinic. And I found myself taking my humanistic understanding of the body and bringing it into the clinic and dealing with these human beings who were kind of caught between medical illness, psychological disturbance, shuffled back and forth between psychologists and family practitioners. And that became a long-term preoccupation of mine. I went into what's called behavioral medicine and psychophysiology. I taught at Duquesne briefly as a teaching assistant. I taught at a regional university in Michigan, Grand Valley State University, and later taught for a behavioral medicine research and education foundation at that time out of the Puget Sound, Seattle area. But mostly I was doing clinical work. I was learning all sorts of mind-body approaches to mind-body-spirit, looking at the total human being. But I kept writing. I kept doing research and writing and staying in touch with people who were at Saybrook. I used Eugene Taylor for a book chapter in a book I brought out on humanistic psychology back in about 99. And I also was in touch with Jeannie Achterberg, who was a speaker occasionally at conferences I attended. And I knew Amadeo Giorgi, who was a expert in phenomenology at Saybrook, and he had actually been one of my professors at Duquesne. So at some point, about 1999, I started talking to another contact there, a man named Ian Wikramasekara. And in 2000, he asked me to become faculty at Saybrook, an adjunct faculty, and work with some of the students in psychophysiology that he was teaching. That quickly grew for me. I really connected well with Jeannie Achterberg, Stanley Krippner, Lynn Freeman, who was then at Saybrook University. Somewhere there, I became the head of what was called Integrative Health Studies. And here I am. 2008, President Mark Schulman came to me, came to Jeannie, and came to Lynn Freeman and talked to us about a new college, taking this humanistic vision, hopefully into healthcare. And we worked on it. We worked with Jim Gordon, who I also knew. Jim was is still the director of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C., and he became the first dean of the new college, and I worked with him on curriculum, and he was actually quite, even though he was not an academic, he was quite helpful. He came through with a lot of insights on building the curriculum. So we had a team, and that's how I ended up with the College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences and at Saybrook.
So, Don, I have to say, like, very impressive history. I have always been impressed with your just the spectrum of work you've done in the field, and of course your incredible work with our College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences. I believe you said Lauren Buckman was the president, right?
Yeah, Lauren Buckman gets all the credit. Mark came along and supported what Lauren had done, but yes, you're totally right.
Yeah, no. You're fine. You're fine. I was just curious when Lauren and you came together and others about the vision for this. Maybe talk a bit about the evolution, because I believe you all started with about 9 or 11 students. Is that right? Back in.
Well, I'll talk about that. First of all, let me just say our team was Jeannie Achterberg, Lynn Freeman, Lauren Buckman, James Gordon, and myself. And we developed a curriculum, and our initial degrees were a master's and a Ph.D. in mind-body medicine. It was interesting because we already included things that go beyond mind-body practices. We included things like food as nutrition as an integral part of integrative care. We began with closer to 24 students, I believe, in the fall of '09. It was an exciting time. We had students who came to us feeling like they had found their calling by finding the College of what then was called College of Mind Body Medicine. One woman had been searching for about 8 years. She'd read about psychoneuroimmunology, and she just was determined that she was going to find some place where she could study this intersection of mind, body, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the psychology of the person, all in one place. And she became part of our first cohort, and in fact became our first PhD graduate. So it was a great time. The program was small, so we had a lot of interaction with each student. Our students came with a lot of varied, highly varied life experience and professional backgrounds. We took in two petroleum engineers, identical twins. We took in a chaplain who was already working on an NCI, National Cancer Institute funded research project. We took in psychologists, we took in a gynecologist, we took in a medical student. So we had quite a diverse group of students, and they meshed very well, and the faculty grew rapidly to include some people that are with us today, such as Luann Fortune, Eric Wilmarth, and Devora Curtis came on very early and contributed to a wonderful learning community.
And over the last, well, now it's been 13 years since its founding.
Yes.
How much has the college grown? How have you seen it evolve in ways, in your perspective, that has been unique or interesting?
Well, it's been exciting to grow the college. The original 2 degrees, the Department of Mind Body Medicine with its master's and PhD, is now approaching 250 students. The college itself is close to 450 students. We added a Department of Integrative and Functional Nutrition. We had from the beginning had nutrition courses, but we were able to add first a master's degree and then more recently a PhD in integrative and functional nutrition. And we do believe that we are what we eat, that food is one of the best forms of medicine. So I'm delighted to have that degree. We took in a program that I had actually taught for before, and that is now our Department of Applied Psychophysiology. It had been a freestanding graduate school, then affiliated with Saybrook in order to get accreditation for its 2 graduate programs, a master's and a PhD in applied psychophysiology. That program has some remarkable adjunct and salaried faculty, highly capable, some of the best teachers in the field of psychophysiology. Finally, we've added the Department of Integrative Social Work, and this has been a dream of ours for at least 10 years. Eric Wilmarth and I kept talking about it, and I was delighted when the university came to us and said that we have a possibility to collaborate with another school within the TCS education system family. Pacific Oaks College would take on a bachelor's and a master's, and we would do the PhD. And that program has grown. I was able to recruit Trent Wynn to head social work, and we are growing somewhere in the mid-30s right now, I believe, in the number of students, which for a new PhD program is excellent. And we've got a great curriculum there. I think it's important. The pandemic has shown us we can't be individual in focus. We have to look at the community, public health, community health, the health of the entire community, or we're not going to have healthy individuals. And social work brings that perspective, looking at epidemiology, looking at public health perspectives. So that rounds out the school for now, the college. It is a pretty comprehensive college in terms of providing a background in integrative healthcare. I hope to expand it further in the future. There are a number of directions we're exploring.
Don, you can't leave Saybrook. So when you think of the runway for new programs, new concepts, I don't want to bore our audience, but I don't think this is boring at all. Like the future growth potential of the college, I think, is immense. And you have such a great vision and passion for it. Where do you see it heading over the next 10 years or so?
If I could dream, I would love to see a department of nursing, a graduate school in nursing, beginning with probably something like a holistic nursing approach to leadership. But I also would love to eventually have a clinical nursing program, turning out clinical nurse specialists at the master's and doctoral level. I would like to have a school or a college of community and public health. We have to be careful, I understand, because some of these markets may be saturated. There may be enough schools already to deal with whatever demand there is. But if we can find that it's practical, I would like to move in those directions. We're now developing a partnership with an acupuncture and oriental medicine college in Houston, the American College of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, and they're an accredited school. So some of our students in spring of 23 will be taking courses in this ACAOM school. We have 5 students right now who are in the process of registering for courses in acupuncture and Oriental medicine. So that's an area that has always been of interest to me. We explored affiliation years ago with the American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine in San Francisco when we were back in San Francisco. That didn't work out, but we certainly saw them as a possible partner and look forward to having additional areas of Asian medicine, Ayurvedic. We have an instructor in Ayurvedic medicine, the traditional medicine of India, and I would love to see more happen in those areas, along with what's becoming mainstream complementary and integrative therapy, looking at evidence-based approaches that complement biologically oriented medicine.
So, Don, that's a lot on the plate, and I think there's a lot that we collectively and you and your team will get done over the next few years. I'm curious, as we talk about the landscape, and for those who aren't schooled in what mind-body medicine is, maybe let's take a step back for a minute for our audience, and maybe if you could just educate us a bit on what is mind-body medicine and how does it play a role in health and healing in a more traditional medical society like the United States?
When a child skins their knee and mama leans over and kisses the knee and says, all better, boo-boo, all better, that's mind-body medicine at the most elemental level. Our minds are quite capable of transforming what happens in our physiology. We have techniques like guided imagery and hypnosis, and it's quite clear that we can use imagery to modify our physiology, to moderate pain, in some cases to remove pain. Sometimes we're simply helping people be less distressed when we use changes in behavior and changes in our mind to modify the body. But sometimes we actually produce measurable change that we can see in neuroimaging. So in this day and age of having functional MRIs, EEGs, and other neuroimaging, we can show skeptics that we're changing the brain and the body when we use some of these mind-body strategies. So mind-body medicine is the use of any strategy, changing behavior and changing our mind, our thinking, our awareness with an impact on the body. We can impact on our endocrine system. We can impact on the gastric system, the enteric nervous system that governs our gastrointestinal processes. We can impact on the central nervous system, and we can impact on the autonomic nervous system. All of this we can do with mind-body strategies.
Not to the exclusion of, but as an important complement in many cases, as you would probably suggest. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to suggest. When we started this college, the prevailing term was complementary and alternative medicine. Complementary medicine was therapies such as biofeedback or hypnosis, which basically are based on the same kind of understanding of the body and physiology as medicine. So it's a similar paradigm. and they were often used from the very beginning to complement medical interventions. Alternative therapies were thought of as something as a substitute or an alternative to traditional medicine, and they often reflected a different paradigm that was hard for biomedical researchers to accept. For example, acupuncture was understood in terms of energy flow within a system of meridians in traditional Chinese thought. Well, today, we're pretty much set aside the alternative therapies and we're focusing on things that can be used to complement mainstream medicine, to work with mainstream medicine. And things that originally seemed alternatives, such as acupuncture, are now very much complementary and they're integrated. So we have complementary therapies, biomedicine together, ideally in one setting, but at least coordinated with each other. So that we call integrative medicine. The part of the NIH, which we relate to the most, used to be called NCAM, National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. Now it's called National Center for Complementary and Integrative Healthcare. So we take it all in under one big tent, but then we closely coordinate it. So we work together for the total well-being of the human being.
Maybe help me unpack here a little bit. I had a lovely conversation with your department chair, Dr. Devora Curtis, on mind-body medicine, and I told her I wanted to get at you on this question as well. So the future of mind-body medicine, especially at places like Saybrook, do you see that diminishing over time, expanding, especially as medical schools seem to or start to adopt more of these integrative healthcare therapies? What do you see as the long-term vision for this?
I have to say that I wasn't sure in the beginning. As mind-body approaches became more acceptable and were taught more frequently, you see courses on meditation, especially taught in traditional schools of psychology as well as in medical schools. I thought maybe there wouldn't be a need for a special department. And yet our Department of Mind-Body Medicine has continued to grow every semester, every year. We graduate many students who already are licensed healthcare professionals. They're nurses, they're physical therapists, they're counselors, they are physicians sometimes. So we graduate a lot of licensed healthcare professionals who add on our models, our skills, our competencies. But we also take in people who don't have a background in healthcare, and they come out and they become consultants to insurance companies, corporate wellness programs. They become instructors teaching, and we have a need there are not enough people who are expert at a graduate level in mind-body medicine and integrative healthcare, so there is a need for teachers. So our attraction for students has seemed to continue to grow, and I hope it will for the indefinite future.
Let's dig in on a couple controversies surrounding mind-body medicine for a moment, and I think you're probably well-versed in some of these. The first is kind of the more general one, and you've spoken to this a little bit about the integration into traditional medicine as well as the future of integrative therapies. But there has been this long-standing tension between traditional and alternative and complementary approaches. I think in light of even what you just said, we're still seeing a medical establishment that, as much as they want to bring it into the curriculum, they're still kind of beholden to that allopathic model. We're seeing more osteopathic schools coming into fruition, but still there's a long way to go. What lies at the core of these tensions, and how do we overcome them in your mind?
Well, I think there's a number of problems. One of them is the problem I pointed to earlier, that some of the so-called alternative therapies came out of a paradigm that still is hard for biomedical researchers or some physicians to accept. The whole concept of energy medicine, there is good research happening in energy medicine. We have a course in energy medicine. It's taught by a researcher, Dr. Beverly Rubik. Nevertheless, models of energy flow of energy, anything that doesn't look like normal physiological explanation are sometimes hard for physicians to accept and researchers to accept. Nevertheless, there's an entire generation of younger physicians, younger nurses, and younger researchers who are themselves utilizing meditation. They're doing yoga, they're doing other mind-body practices, they're learning hypnosis, and they're ready to apply them with their patients. So the world is changing. When I came to West Michigan, it was a very conservative area religiously, and I had I had one patient who took a hypnosis book off my bookshelf, threw it across the room, said, "That's the devil's work," and walked out, and I never saw him again. Now those books, when they're on my shelf, patients pick them up, look at that and say, "Hey, do you do this? Could I experience that?" So there's an openness today. So number one, it seems alternative therapy, complementary therapies seem strange. Number two is access. The best evidence-based complementary therapies, which are well-based in research, biofeedback, neurofeedback, hypnosis, guided imagery, are expensive. And when we move them into a medical setting, they become more expensive. And they're often not, sometimes they're covered by insurance, but in many cases they're not covered by insurance. So we have people who can't afford to access the best evidence-based complementary therapies. Then we have in the communities, we have people starting wellness centers, community wellness centers that do a lot of good because they're cheaper. They don't pay the high medical real estate prices for rent, and they utilize less credentialed therapists, but as a result, they're also using a wide range of complementary therapies that we don't really know much about. Magnets, crystals, a lot of nutrition that's done without any real testing to test what the real sensitivities or deficiencies might be. And yet they're accessible. They're in the community, so people can access them. Fortunately, there's a lot of very positive things that happen there, such as yoga, which is one of the cheapest, most universally available therapies. So again, that's the access problem. Our students from the very beginning, I can remember our first class in nutrition, the students came to the chair and said, "This integrative nutrition is too important, it's too powerful, it can't just be for the wealthy." So we now have embraced the organization, Integrative Medicine for the Underserved. The acronym is IM4US, Integrative Medicine for the Underserved. We were a co-sponsor of their recent conference, and Luann Fortune, one of our faculty, was on the program. A number of our students participated, and faculty participated. So we support getting good, solid complementary therapies accessible for the whole community. So that's access. Second problem is research. Research is expensive. Today, the standards for what is efficacious, what has good clinical efficacy, are extremely high. And a lot of the studies in the area of complementary therapies are relatively small studies. They're small studies for a number of reasons. Because it's expensive to do large studies. Also because a lot of the complementary therapies take an awful lot of time. If you're going to do individual biofeedback with a patient in a research study, and you want to see 1,000 people, it's going to take several years to get that study done. Another problem is that many of the complementary therapies are highly individualized. They're customized to each person. When you try the same intervention out in what's called a manualized form, where everybody gets things exactly the same, you often don't get very good results. There was an important study, a multi-center study on biofeedback for Raynaud's disorder. Well, a particular form of biofeedback had shown in study after study to be effective for Raynaud's, but when they did the multi-center study, they got very poor results. When it was later reviewed, it turned out that one of the forms of manualization, making everything standard, was everybody got the same number of sessions, minutes of treatment, whether or not they learned. So you're supposed to warm your hands in thermal biofeedback as an indication that you're modifying the autonomic nervous system and vasodilating. Well, it wasn't happening. So yes, they were attached to the equipment for the standard number of minutes, but they weren't learning the skill that was at the core of that intervention. So that's one of the problems when you try to standardize. Nevertheless, some of these areas in complementary therapies are getting it right. Biofeedback and neurofeedback is one of them. I was part of a process back in 2001, appointing a task force to create standards for research, outcome research in biofeedback and neurofeedback. And I'm now one of the editors for the 4th edition of a book coming out on evidence-based practice in that area. The book will come out in spring of 23. Yeah, so that area, biofeedback, has compiled research. Hypnosis, right now there's an international task force. I'm the convener for that task force. And we've published efficacy standards now, and now we're in dialogue with research groups to use those standards, so there will be research studies that stand up better to critical review. But that is one of the problems. When you get meta-analyses that look at a lot of different studies over time, they're frequently able to find areas of the study design where there could be some bias. It's hard to blind studies, for example, in these therapies. How are you going to not tell people that you're in the hypnosis group when they're going through a process of going into trance? Now, what we're finding is we can blind the person who analyzes the data. So the person who analyzes the data doesn't have to know which group the person is assigned to. And we can do things like that. So we have a partial blinding and a randomized controlled design for the research. There's one more thing I'll touch on here, Nathan. The technology revolution. The pandemic accelerated, but it started earlier. We've got apps and we've got portable devices that are coming into use in complementary therapies. I mean, I'm thinking especially biofeedback because I know that area very well, but it's also happening in hypnosis and guided imagery and other areas. There are apps, and now we have research studies. It's easier to do a larger study because you don't have to bring everybody into the office. I've just reviewed a couple of research reports. In one of them, the researchers never met the participants face to face. Everything was done at a distance. It was done well, and the experimental group got very good results. So I think those are going to be breakthrough areas. You get wearable technology to monitor what's happening in the body, and then you give people instructions remotely and through apps.
Don, it's clear you have been in this field for a long time and you know what you're talking about. You hit on a lot of the questions that I think have been front of mind. I used to sit on a medical institution review board, and we occasionally get requests, right, to see these studies come to fruition through the healthcare system of which this was a part. And I've often had this, I'll call it a friendly debate. I think sometimes it gets close to an argument on more than one occasion about the fact that all the things you mentioned, plus the gatekeeping that happens in traditional medical research centers, right? So I've always said that, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we would agree that if you find something isn't efficacious, we don't want to be using it to the detriment of the patient, the client. But we're not going to find that out if we gatekeep these studies too, right? If we gatekeep the research that's happening. I'm not suggesting it's happening more all over the place now, but I think that has been also a contributing factor to the inability for some of these studies. Do you agree? Do you not agree? I mean,
I totally agree. I teach ethics for both hypnosis and biofeedback, and one of the things we teach people is if something's experimental, if it hasn't become state of the art, you have to tell your patient, but that doesn't mean you can't offer to do it. If you've had good results with it, and there have been some small studies showing good results, and the patient has already tried the mainstream remedies and hasn't benefited, most patients will want to try something new. So it's just that we have to fully inform the patient because they deserve to know what decision they're making.
Excellent point. I want to shift to a separate controversy that is also kind of big, I think, in these times, especially as we've grown in greater consciousness around the country related to race, ethnicity, and co-optation. So just spend a few minutes on this. So a few things have cropped up over the years around Ayurvedic medicine, for example, or some of the other Eastern therapies that have been promoted, and suggesting that a lot of those folks who use them or engage their clients with certain practices are co-opting those therapeutic techniques. And it's not of this country, it's not of this culture. What are your thoughts on that? How does the mind body medicine and the integrative community address that in a meaningful way?
Boy, that's a terribly important topic. We also talk about that under cultural appropriation. We've had a student at Saybrook, a master's student in mind-body medicine, Vera Maura, who was a Brazilian physician and psychiatrist, but was also in a shamanic tradition. She was an apprentice to a shamanic healer, came to the United States, actually did her master's degree with Saybrook on a shamanic seminar. And one of her questions was, how well does this transplant? Because we're in a very different cultural setting. It's not a village. You don't have people who are following a ritual path of life. You had people who came to her seminars on the weekend, commuting out from the city to a retreat center, and yet they participated in the shamanic seminar for a period of weeks. They showed dramatic personal transformation. Now, she was in a lineage, so in that sense, we weren't co-opting or culturally misappropriating this lineage, which was called Jaguar medicine, but she was applying it outside the context and then measuring the results and measuring it with case study narratives and a thematic analysis. And it was a very interesting study. I co-authored two articles with her afterwards, which got published. So for me, this is one example. Yoga is another example. We teach yoga largely in the United States for exercise, for weight control, things like that. In fact, the various versions of yoga that get practiced today are quite distant from original yogic practices in past times in India. Hot yoga is certainly an American invention. And yet I was on a panel with some yoga experts about 15 years ago, and this question came up, and one of the speakers said, yoga is our Trojan horse. It is our gift to your culture, and your citizens are using it for physical well-being, for weight control, for exercise, for mobility. But it is a Trojan horse, and if it's practiced well, it will transform them anyway. Now, that's a one position. There are other positions that say that we shouldn't even be teaching meditation or yoga or anything else outside of the tradition that it was born from. And yet, with integrative healthcare, a large number of the techniques that are promoted were deliberately extracted from their tradition. Herbert Benson at Harvard and Mass General Hospital was studying transcendental meditation, and he developed an empirically standardized meditation that resembled transcendental meditation, but without the religious content, beliefs, and philosophy. And he did that because he found resistance when he tried to teach in a medical setting, tried to teach TM. But when he taught empirically standardized meditation, he got tremendous benefits for the patients, and they were more open to it because it seemed somehow medical. So I think that's the problem. If you want to make something more acceptable, you present it in a way that isn't so far from the patient's own culture. But then you're losing all of the value, the benefit of the rest of the package. Ayurvedic medicine as a totality is a way of life. And for some people, Ayurvedic medicine just means they take some herbs that are different from other herbs. It will remain, I think, an issue because so many indigenous practices are making their way into the medical and mental health sphere.
I think the main point here, right, is that we have to keep talking about it, keeping it at the front of conversation rather than, calling it out where we need to, having the discussion and checking in. Several of our faculty, I know we've had this discussion at Saybrook internally, right, where if we're not having the discussion about it, it's kind of buried deep. But if we're open and having the maybe the difficult discussion, or is it co-optation? Is it cultural appropriation or misappropriation? Those are all elements to it. I appreciate you taking a stab at that. I think you did a fine job in addressing it, and that there is no immediate solution because there's so many angles to this very important question. So, Don, our time is. I could talk. I say this with every guest, and it's true for you. We could spend hours. I feel like I should get a grade for this course. I'll write a paper for you. You might fail me on it, but it'd be great. Maybe talk for a minute. So kind of the Don Moss mini quiz show. What I want to do here is get your take on a list of various integrative therapies, some of which you've already mentioned. But really just, what's your perspective? Very quick take on each clinical viability. So we don't have a whole lot of time, but I think this will offer our audience.
I'll try not to go off on lengthy dissertations on each.
I'll do this. How's that if we...
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So quick take on meditation.
Meditation is becoming the most widely used and accepted complementary practice. It's not new. It's thousands of years old, but we have good research. Neuroimaging does show changes in the brain when we meditate. Research shows that our telomeres, those little caps, those little legs on the DNA, actually get healthier when we meditate, when we do longer-term meditation. So there's a lot of benefits that are measurable, which I think is helping make it acceptable to the medical profession, but it's also transformative. I meditate almost every day, and I'm a better person for it. Years ago, I had a friend who was a horrible person. He was hard to be around. After his midday meditation, he was a much nicer person. So meditation is powerful, and I support anyone who can take the time to make room in their schedule each day for a meditative practice, whether it's traditional Christian prayer, whether it's Muslim chanting, whether it's mindfulness meditation, breath meditation, lots of spiritual awakening, personal awakening, transforming of one's own life, but also medical and health benefits.
All right, we got to move to the next. Don, that was great. And for full disclosure, the grumpy, horrible person he was talking about was not me.
It goes back much farther in my life, Nathan.
All right, what about Reiki?
Oh, that's Reiki. Reiki is very interesting because it's an energy therapy, and yet it's in a lot of medical settings. A study was done about 3 years ago on a large sample with almost 100 practitioners, and they found positive benefits for quite a few medical disorders, pain, nausea, appetite problems, shortness of breath, depression. Patients love it. Patients love the soothing feeling of Reiki. Now, is it placebo? I don't know. I don't think we have the research on that yet. I'd like to see more neuroimaging studies and physiological studies done on Reiki. But we do know it feels good. Patients sleep better. They get more relaxed. Well, that's all therapeutic benefit. And then it seems to impact on medical disorders. Cancer wards, people have less nausea and less pain when they get Reiki.
So Reiki, Reiki, for those interested. The next one, am I saying this correctly? Qigong?
Qigong?
Qigong. Okay, there you go.
Well, I saw your list, Nathan, and I'll talk about two things together: Tai Chi and Qigong, because they are related. They're Asian in origin. Tai Chi began as a martial art, but it involves a series of graceful movements. Qigong has a different origin. There's more of an emphasis on the energy flow in the person, but the result looks the same, gentle movement. And there's good research on both in medical settings. Balance problems. You can reduce the number of falls in elderly persons if you do Tai Chi or Qigong. Interestingly, it's very helpful with patients with Parkinson's disease. There are studies in other areas that I'm not as familiar with, but I know it's been tried with adverse effects of cancer treatments.
Last one because of time, but Don, I want to go through this whole list with you at some point in time. Forest bathing or forest therapy?
I actually happen to be, because of our partnership with IMC Krems in Austria, I was at an international conference for the International Society for Forest Therapy in Austria. And it is very interesting. This is big in Japan and China, where the government has actually set aside thousands of acres of forest area, and people are bussed out to those areas. And the reason the governments are spending money is they believe it reduces medical costs, because people who are able to be exposed to nature are healthier, basically. Now, there's research coming out of Japan. American researchers are critical of some of the research, but they're claiming decreased cortisol levels, decreased sympathetic nervous activation, decreased heart rate, increased parasympathetic activation. Research is just getting stronger now, and I think we're going to have to wait to really be sure. There are claims that it's biochemical, that the trees are breathing out something that's beneficial for us. Well, I live in a pine forest. I take walks in the pine forest, and then I come out to Lake Michigan at a bluff, and I look down on the lake, and the fresh air of the lake comes and washes over me, and then I go back into the pine forest. I'm breathing that air. I feel invigorated. Now, if you live in an urban world with concrete and very little green, I believe it's healthful. I don't think we fully understand all the mechanisms. There are some early research studies saying if you've got plants growing in your house, you're going to get some of the benefit. And since I have plants everywhere in my house and outside my house, I'm trusting that I'm getting that benefit.
So I know I'm going to come live with you. California, as beautiful as it is, doesn't sound half as nice as Don's backyard. So I think that's great. Don, I seriously, we're going to have you back for a future episode. This was just a delight. You're so knowledgeable. Before we go, I have two quick takes for you. And this is for our collective audience. One is a quiz that so far everyone has passed, but I'm not sure, Don.
Yeah, I'll probably fail it.
Yeah, I don't know. So what does the term humanistic mean to you?
Humanistic for me means three things. The first is we want to understand the human being in his or her totality, mind, body, and spirit. Secondly, we don't want to understand that person by generalizing from animal studies in a little metal box, nor do we want to generalize from patients who are diminished by their mental illness. We want to look at the fullness of what a human being is capable of, a Mother Teresa, an Albert Einstein, a Marc Chagall, and we want to understand how can we facilitate human potential. So number one, we want to look at the whole person. Number two, we want to look at ways to facilitate human potential. And number three, in ourselves, we have a responsibility to live our own potential fully, because we can't share it with others if we don't experience it ourselves. And that's been a fundamental principle of our College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences from the beginning, that we challenge our students to walk the talk, to engage in self-care practices, to realize their own fullness, so that when they talk about it with a patient or a corporate client, they embody what they're talking about.
Dr. Moss, that's an A+ with distinction right there. It's like you wrote a textbook on it.
Maybe I did.
All right. And then lastly, and this is truly quick takes because we're giving our audience a few to-dos, if you will. What are 3 major things someone can do right now to improve their mental and or physical well-being?
One of them goes back to one of my favorite professors in Pittsburgh at Duquesne University, who used to say to us, "This is your existence." When I get up in the morning, and I encourage others to try this, I ask myself, I say, this is my existence. This is my one and only path through this world. Is this the path I want to walk? Am I satisfied with the path I'm following? Who I'm filling that path with, my companions, and how I'm walking the path. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to develop a self-care practice for yourself. It might be music, it might be meditation, it might be qigong, but pour your heart and regularly engage with that practice. And then the third is to have dreams. A dream that you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. So have a dream, share it with your colleagues, share it with your friends, and actualize it. So we have to listen to John Lennon.
There you go, Brother Don. Wow, what a fabulous time with you today. Thank you very much. What great sage wisdom from Dean Dr. Donald Moss of the College of Integrative Medicine here at Saybrook University. Don, real quick before we go, where can folks find you on the web?
We have Saybrook University webinars in integrative medicine on YouTube. We have Saybrook University self-care on YouTube. We have Saybrook University Mindful Moments on Spotify.
And YouTube.
Yeah, that's right, and YouTube. And then I have a horrible website, but it still has some valuable things, drdonaldmoss.net. I've got to get it fixed one of these days.
So Saybrook University, YouTube, all over it, and drdonaldmoss.net. Don, thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, our guest did it again. They nailed it. It was fabulous talking to Don. I felt like I could have gone on for hours and truly, truly learned so much today. I hope you enjoyed Don as much as I did. Remember those 3 fabulous takeaways for improving your mental and emotional and physical health. Wake up each day and say to yourself, this is my existence, my one and only path. Is this the path today? Am I satisfied with it, with the people around me? Number 2, develop that self-care practice, whether it's music, meditation, or whatever. And 3, have dreams. A dream or dreams dreamed together is reality. If you want to see the fabulous video segments we've created, our fabulous Phil Jean-Grande, our producer, is woven into place. Please visit our Saybrook YouTube page. If you would like to support the podcast, go to Apple iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review and subscribe so you can get episodes as they come out. If you're on Spotify, leave that 5-star rating and make sure to follow us. You can, of course, subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, including Google, Stitcher, Pandora, and others. Remember to check out our show notes for information on today's guest, including links to Dr. Moss's website, books, and the like. And for more about our various integrative medicine and health sciences programs, including mind-body medicine, or the university, go to www.saybrook.edu. Click on areas of study at the top of the page and locate the program to learn more. Or simply Google Saybrook University, College of Integrative Medicine and Health Sciences. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us, for subscribing, for supporting our university. We are so glad you're here with us. Take care and be well.